For sport photography, the idea is to have a very fast shutter speed so you can stop the motion. Now, in order to set this up, there are a couple options you can go with. The camera does have an automatic option. You can do this by moving your mode dial to SCN. This stands for scene mode. And in the scene mode, you have access to sport. Right now I'm set up to the portrait profile. I can just use my dial, move that over until I get to sport. Now with sport, what's going to happen is it's going to do the best it can to increase the shutter speed. So for example, I press my shutter halfway, and you can see right now I'm at ISO 400 and 1/500th of a second, which is very fast, probably good enough for just about any sport. And this should be just fine. I wouldn't want to decrease the ISO from 400, at least not with the current amount of light I have available, because then my shutter speed will decrease, and I certainly don't want it any slower than 1/500th of a second. The bad part about using this mode is that my white balance is set to automatic. Now if you're outdoors, that should be fine, but if you're in a stadium and it's a night game where you have the lights on, that may not be as good. And you may want to use a white balance set to tungsten or fluorescent, depending on the situation. Otherwise, your pictures may come out pretty yellow or green. The other thing you'll notice in this mode is that the drive mode is set to continuous. This is automatically set to continuous for you, and what this does is allow you to press the shutter button, hold the button down, and as long as the button is pressed and held down, the camera will keep on taking pictures. So this is good if you want to capture, for example, race cars or horses that are running by. You can press the shutter button halfway, focus on something that is about the same distance as where the subject will be once you want to take a picture of it, and then just go ahead and press the button the rest of the way, and the camera will continuously take pictures. Now the camera is not that fast. It takes a little bit more than a second for the camera to take each picture, so I wouldn't expect too much from this camera. The other thing you can do if you want control over the white balance, but everything else is okay, is get out of this mode, go back and turn this to TV. TV stands for time value. Time value will allow you to set a shutter speed that suits your needs depending on the sporting event you're taking a picture of. Right now you can see my shutter speed is set to 10 seconds. That's very, very slow. So I'm just going to use this dial to increase that. I'm going to go up to 1/500th of a second. This is pretty good. You may want to have it a little bit faster. It really depends on the sporting event. But for now, I'm going to stick to 1/500th of a second. I don't need to use the flash, especially if you're in a stadium. The flash, you're much too far away from the subject, so don't use the flash. It's not going to do any good. Press the flash button right here to access the different flash options and turn that off. Click Set. My white balance is currently set to custom, which is not what I want. So I'm going to press the shortcut button. In the Getting Started guide, I set up my shortcut button to access my white balance. And I'm going to move that to daylight. I'm assuming it's an outdoor event, so I'm going to use daylight. If it's indoors or if the lights are on, you can use tungsten or fluorescent, whichever one suits your needs the best. And I'm going to just stick to daylight for now. Press Set to OK that. Now I'm not using the flash. My white balance is set to daylight. And I want to make sure that my ISO is properly set. So what you do, press the shutter button halfway. Just compose the image the way you want to. Don't worry about focusing at this point. And you can see that with 1/500th of a second, my aperture is not only f2.8, which is as big as it can get, probably not what I want for sports, because this is going to produce a very shallow depth of field, but it's also in red. When it's in red, it means that my shutter speed is too fast and it can't compensate enough for the proper amount of light. The way I can fix that is by increasing the ISO. Increasing the ISO will make the camera more sensitive to the available light, and that will allow me to have a smaller aperture. So I'm going to turn my ISO dial. I'll increase that to 400, and I'll try again. Press the shutter button halfway. Now I see that my aperture is 5.6 and it's in white, which is great. I know my exposure is going to be just fine, so I don't need to increase the ISO any more than that. Now for taking the picture, if you can focus on the subject, go ahead and do that. Press the button halfway. Make sure the focusing square is either on your subject or on something at roughly the same distance from the camera as your subject. Press the shutter button halfway. Make sure it turns green and has the double beep indicating the camera has locked focus. And then go ahead and recompose the image and press the shutter button the rest of the way. If you're unable to focus because the target is moving, what I would recommend doing is one of two things. Either focus on something that is still at roughly the same distance. For example, if it is a horse race, focus on the fence or the dirt where the horses will be passing you before the horses even get there. So then once they get there, you're ready to just press the shutter button the rest of the way and take the picture. Or use the manual focus. Press the up navigation button to access manual focus and turn the dial. If you're in a stadium, you can turn it all the way up to infinity. You're probably going to be far enough away where infinity is the focusing point that you're going to want to use. Now you can go ahead and press the shutter button halfway, and the camera is set up. Just go ahead and wait for the action to start and press the shutter button the rest of the way. As soon as it does, and the camera will instantly take the picture. To find out much more about digital photography and your digital camera, go to lbguides.com.